Hello, my name is Brian Friese, and I would like to begin by thanking Let the Children Fly and the Malachi 4-6 movement for giving me this opportunity to do this segment. I'm a business owner, and I'm also the co host of a podcast called Triggered and True, where we discuss emotional health topics, as well as a process my co host Laura Duncan created called the Compassion Method. And in addition to that, I'm also a father of 4 daughters that are currently aged 13, 19, 23, and 26. Even though my children are a little older, I still look at myself very much in the arena with all of you in this world of parenting. Parenting is very rewarding, but at times it can also be very painful and triggering. Laura defines a trigger as an irrational response to a rational or irrational situation, circumstance, or person. You know you are triggered when you're not okay. Okay being defined as clear-minded, tender-hearted, and at peace. Now, one of the things that's so challenging about a trigger and even recognizing when you are triggered is that sometimes you're triggered for very rational reasons, like maybe someone cut you off in traffic, or you're overlooked for a promotion, someone's gossiping behind your back, or maybe your children refuse to pick up their room, clean up their mess, they don't do their homework. Or maybe it's even more serious than that. Maybe your children are doing something that's putting themselves in harm's way. But Jesus demonstrated to us that it is possible to be okay, clear-minded, tender-hearted, and at peace in any situation. I often think about the story of him on the boat during the storm. So the disciples are just going crazy. They're flipping out very rationally, right? There's this horrible storm going on. But where's Jesus? He's asleep. He's clear-minded, he's tender-hearted, and he's at peace. And from that place of peace, he spoke to the storm to be still, and it was. He made the outside world match his inside world. It wasn't the other way around. He didn't have to get the outside world in order for his inside world to be at peace. One of the most devastating and detrimental things about a trigger is it's a period of time when we are disconnected from ourself, our true self. That is who God created us to be. From a scientific standpoint, what's happening in a triggered moment is that we're operating out of our primal brain, which is located at the rear of our head, just directly above our spinal cord. Primal brain is oftentimes called our primary brain or our child brain because it was our first developed part of our brain. Later on in life, our frontal lobe, which is called our adult brain, is developed. And studies now show us that that part of our brain is developing well into our mid-20s. And that part of our brain is where our adult sophisticated logic and reason lives. So you could have someone that is a trained psychologist that knows all of this information, but in that triggered moment, they have no access to that part of their brain. And kind of a funny story around this, when I was first learning this material, I found myself in our kitchen in an argument with my 23-year-old daughter, who was 18 at the time. We were arguing about whose turn it was to do the dishes. And we were going back and forth. And all of a sudden, it just dawned on me. Like, I was just learning this material. I'm like, wait a second. This is no longer a 43-year-old and an 18-year-old talking to each other. We are basically now 2 5-year-olds arguing back and forth because we were both operating out of that primal part or that primary part of our brain. Now, we want this part of our brain. This part of our brain is not a bad thing. We want this part of our brain to kick in because it is a natural defense mechanism. When our house is on fire, we don't want to sit there and logic and reason, gee, I wonder how the house started on fire and what could I do to have prevented this, or what could I do to prevent this in the future? No, we don't want to do any of that. We want to react. We want to kick into that mode of fight, flight. We need to get out of that house. We need to grab our children and we need to get out. The problem comes in when that part of our brain is kicking in when our life is not being threatened, when there is no lion chasing us. And the reality is that the majority of people live the majority of their life more from their triggered self than from their true self, or that is from that part of themselves that God created them to be. So why do we trigger? And why do we get so worked up about things that rationally we just know that we really shouldn't? Then why also does it seem like our spouses and our children often get the worst of us? The answer is actually very simple. We trigger because in our hearts, we are carrying pain. And that pain is connected to unmet emotional needs. Proverbs 4:23 states, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. The reality is that most of us have not done a very good job taking care of our heart. And the reason that our spouses and our children often get the brunt of that is because they are closest to our pain. You see, we can go out into the world and we can fake it really well. We can go to work, we can go to church, and we can put on a front that everything's okay. Same as in social media. On Facebook, our life can look perfect. Our photoshopped life looks perfect. But at home is where it's the most real. That pain eventually will come out. Now, Laura Duncan has developed a process called the compassion method that is designed to help us comfort this internal pain and to get these unmet needs met. She refers to these emotional needs as the 10 gifts. The gifts are as follows: to be seen, to be heard, to be accepted, to be valued, to be provided for, to play, to be protected, to know that you are enough, to have affection, and to be taught. Now, these 10 gifts are like vitamins that are vitally needed in early childhood development. Now, God's design is for biological parents to be the tangible expression of Himself and to be the ones He entrusts to be the deliverer of these gifts. This is the pattern God chose with His own Son, Jesus. And so it is with us. Now, if you think about it, Jesus could have just walked right out of heaven as a 30-year-old man and began to preach. He could have been raised by angels. He could have been raised by animals. He could have been raised any other way. God could have done it any other way, but He chose to use humans, a mom and a dad. And Mary and Joseph, of course, were guided supernaturally, like we all are. But ultimately, it was they that protected Jesus by fleeing to Egypt. It was they that provided for Jesus by feeding Him and nurturing Him. It was they that were the first to see Him, to hear Him, to accept Him, to value Him, to play with Him, to show Him that He was enough, to give Him affection. And they were also the first to teach Him. Now, none of our parents were able to do this perfectly. And by, people are doing the best they can with what they know. And this is something that I also had to accept, because as I was learning this material, the ship had already sailed with two of my children. They were adults now. I had to look at this very honestly, very reflectively, and grieve the aspects of these gifts, these emotional needs that I was not able to give my children. But again, just like my parents, I was doing the best I could with what I knew. One of the gifts that I was not able to give my children because I did not have it myself was the gift of enough. That is something that I talk about in one of the podcasts in great detail. I think it's episode 18. But that gift is something that was not living inside of me. And because it was not living inside of me, I didn't have it to give to my children. See, there are no villains. Again, people are doing the best they can with what they know. But what there are is a lot of hurting people that are just acting out their pain. Now, just because we didn't get these 10 gifts in our early childhood development does not mean that all is lost. See, God created our brains with elasticity. Science has revealed to this, but Paul told us this in Romans many, many centuries ago. He says that we can be transformed by the renewal of our mind. That is, we can go back and help our child self receive the gifts that we missed. Our core tenet of the compassion method is that God knew what our parents could and could not provide in advance. So He sent these gifts to us in other forms through other people, maybe teachers, maybe other relatives, maybe neighbors, maybe your Bible school, your Sunday school teacher. God sent these gifts to us in other forms. He is relentless at sending us love. And so much of the compassion method process is simply designed to help give us eyes to see where God gave us those things that our parents were unable to. So the compassion method really is first for yourself, but as a wonderful side benefit, you now have something to give your children. Like I said, the gift of enough. as I get that gift for myself, I now have it to give to my children. So to learn more about this topic, I encourage you to check out triggeredandtrue.com, and you can listen to the podcast. And you can also check out Laura's website for other resources at lauraduncan.com. So no matter where you find yourself on this parenting journey, whether you're just getting started or whether you're like me, you're a ways into it, you've made a lot of mistakes along the way. No matter where you find yourself, there's always opportunity to learn to put Proverbs 4:23 into practice and learn to take care of your heart, learn how to bring comfort to your inner world so that as you trigger, you can learn to comfort that pain and live not from your triggered self, but from your true self, so that you can discover more and more of who you are, but also as that wonderful side benefit, your children and your family will be able to get to experience that wonderful you that God created you to be. So I pray God's richest blessing on this journey to discovering who God created you to be and learning how to walk that out in your role as a parent. Thank you, and God bless.